UV coordinates are a big part to applying materials on your model. It is a way to apply a 2D texture to a 3D object while using a coordinate system with U and V instead of the already used X, Y, and Z. Using this new system, it maps the materials and textures accordingly. Every part is imported with its own coordinate system, and SOLIDWORKS Sell maps textures according to that and uses it as a default setting. All of the parts in this table have their UV coordinates set to default, and as you can see, some of the wood grains of the texture are not going in a realistic direction, and some of the texture sizes do not represent the table in a realistic way. If you are not satisfied with how the textures are oriented on your parts, you can change them by going into the Groups tab and selecting the UV coordinates option. You are met with a drop-down menu where you can select exactly how your textures go onto the parts. To explain each option, I will use the supports for the table and turn on the axis helper. Turning on the axis helper may help visualize which plane the textures are going to attach to. The red line is the x-axis, green is the y-axis, and the z-axis is blue. All of the options and settings under the UV Coordinates tab correlate with these axes. For instance, the option XY1 Planner tells you that the texture will be applied to the faces along the plane that is created by the X and Y axis. By selecting this option, it will apply the texture to these faces. The faces where this texture does not apply to will have some smudges and lines instead. This is because the One Planner options only apply the texture to single planes that coincide with the option you have selected. One Planner options are recommended for parts that are thin because you will not be able to see the sides of the object that do not have textures on it. Under the drop-down menu, there are 3 buttons that will change the orientation of the material on the part. The X and Y in the beginning reiterate which plane you are making the changes to, and they switch depending on which option you have selected above. The Rotate button will rotate the material 90 degrees. The Reverse button shows the mirrored version of the texture, and the Flip option flips it in the other remaining direction. Next, we'll move on to the YZ1 Planner option. This will apply the material to the plane made by the Y and Z axis, and will therefore map to these planes. The YZ buttons work in the same way, except their names are slightly changed to show that they are only applying to this plane. Furthermore, the next option in the drop-down menu, XZ1 Planner, will only apply the material and change its orientation to the plane made by the X and Z axis. Lastly, there is an XYZ 3 Planner option, which applies the texture to each of the planes and holds all of the previous orientation buttons. Because of this, it is recommended to use this option for most parts. From here, you can easily change the mapping of the material to make it more realistic. In this case, I only need to select the YZ Rotate option to make the grain of the wood go in the right direction. One last thing to mention is changing the texture size. This is a helpful tool because you'll be able to change the size of material on your parts. In this case, you can stretch and shrink the size of the material by changing these numbers, although it is recommended that you keep these 2 numbers the same to not distort the texture. I've gone ahead and changed the UV coordinates for each of the parts, and as you can see, it makes a big difference in terms of realism. Now, all of the wood grains go in the right direction, and all of the texture sizes are the same. Above all, with this new information, you will be able to change the fine details that can really make your product stand out on your website.